There's a silence that doesn't belong to nature. It's the kind that hums between walls, under fluorescent lights, between the click of a relay and the next breath you don't realize you're holding. That's the silence I lived with for 6 months, the graveyard shift at the Springfield Municipal Records Complex. And 3 years later, I still can't sit in a quiet building without feeling it breathe back. I took the job in the fall of 2020. It was steady work, good pay, benefits, nothing dangerous. The complex was a cluster of connected buildings, an old brick archives wing, a newer scanning center, and a windowless cube that housed the servers. During the day, clerks buzzed around like bees. At night, it was just me, a ring of keys, and 48 security cameras linked to 2 ancient monitors in a booth by the lobby. I liked the routine. Rounds at 11, 1, and 3. Check locks. Tug a few random doors. Note the time in the logbook. The rest of the night, I spent half watching those screens, coffee cooling at my elbow, the air conditioner droning like a heartbeat. After a few weeks, I could walk that place blindfolded. I knew which motion sensors false triggered, which lights flickered for no reason. But that's the thing. When you know a building too well, you notice when it starts acting wrong. That night started like any other. Rain slanting across the parking lot. The smell of wet leaves in the air. The last staff had clocked out early because of the storm. I locked the main doors, did my 11 o'clock patrol, and came back to the booth. Everything was fine. At 11:47, a soft chime sounded. Motion alert. Archives C. That wing was in the old basement. Low ceilings, shelves packed with decades of dusty records. I pulled up the feed. A single aisle, lined with boxes. Nothing moved. Probably the air vents stirring dust. Still, I went down to check. The concrete ramp echoed under my boots. The air felt thick and stale, the kind that clings to your tongue. Every padlock was secure, every light steady. I even said out loud, all clear, just to hear my own voice. When I came back upstairs, the alert had cleared. At 12:31, it chimed again, server corridor. That hallway always unnerved me. It was long, white, and perfectly straight, ending in a steel door marked authorized personnel only. The feed blinked twice, a glitch maybe, and for a second the hallway seemed longer than usual. I remember thinking, that's impossible. The lens doesn't move, but the feeling stuck, like the space itself had shifted when I wasn't looking. I stayed in the booth after that, pretending to read. The storm quieted outside. Inside, the air grew stiller, denser. The vents went silent, the hum of electricity flattening into one long tone. And in that vacuum, I realized how loud my breathing sounded. That's when I saw it, on the monitor showing the lobby glass behind me. My reflection, only it wasn't in sync. It tilted its head, slowly, as if studying me. I froze. My heart thumped once hard. When I turned around, there was nothing but my empty chair and the faint reflection of the monitors. I told myself it was just fatigue, screen burn, bad lighting, imagination. But deep down, something had shifted. The building felt aware. At 1:14 a.m., another alert. Archive C again. I stared at the feed. A box on the lower shelf, one of thousands, moved. Not fell, not slid. Moved. A slow, deliberate inch, leaving a drag mark through the dust. I swallowed hard and grabbed my flashlight. The ramp was slick with condensation. The moment I stepped into the archives room, the cold hit, a kind of still, deep chill that didn't belong to air conditioning. The smell of damp paper filled my lungs. Halfway down the aisle, I heard it. A scrape. 1, 2, 3 inches. Not rats. Not pipes. Too slow. When I reached the end, the same box sat slightly out of line. I touched it, pushing it back into place. The cardboard was warm. That detail shouldn't matter, but it burned into my brain. I left without finishing my round. By 2 a.m., I was back in the booth, staring at the monitors, every muscle tight. Then it happened. Every single feed went black except the lobby view. The timestamp still ran, but the screen showed only dense, heavy dark. On the one remaining feed, the booth door behind me was wide open. I never leave it open. As I leaned closer, the picture brightened, faint, flickering, like another light had come on inside the feed. And then I saw it. A thin, vertical line ran down the wall beside my chair, a seam that wasn't there in real life. It began to open, widening like a door viewed through thick glass. Inside that seam was another lobby, my lobby, but not quite right. The lighting was duller, the shadows heavier. In that reflection, the chair at my desk wasn't empty anymore. Someone was sitting in it, still, head slightly tilted toward the monitor, the same tilt my reflection had given me earlier. I couldn't move. Every instinct screamed to shut my eyes, to cut the power, to stop existing in that moment. But I stayed, hypnotized, watching the version of myself that wasn't moving like me anymore. Then, blink. Everything snapped back. All cameras restored. The walls seamless again. I don't know how long I sat there before sunrise. When the day guard arrived, he laughed at how pale I looked and said, "Long night, huh?" I muttered something and left. That afternoon, half asleep at home, I got an email from facilities. Subject: After Hours Motion Alert, Verify Patrol. Attached was a still image from my feed at 3:06 a.m. It showed the booth door wide open, and a tall, faint silhouette standing inside, right where my chair should have been. I didn't reply. I worked 2 more shifts, but the silence felt thicker each night, like the building was listening for me. On my last night, right before 2, I caught my reflection in the lobby glass. I smiled just to test myself, and I swear, the reflection didn't. It just watched. I quit that week. Now I work daytime, loud machines, constant noise, the kind that doesn't let you think too long. But sometimes, driving past that old complex, I glance at the dark lobby window. The glass still throws reflections, even at night. And every once in a while, if I slow down enough, I swear I see someone sitting inside the booth, same build, same posture, watching me drive by. It's not fear I feel anymore. It's recognition. Because maybe on nights when the building goes quiet enough to breathe, something in there remembers my name. And maybe it's still waiting for me to finish my shift. I still have the extra key. It's on its own ring, separate from the ones I use daily. Sometimes I find it in my pocket without remembering I put it there. Keys do that when a door above you keeps a schedule you never agreed to, but somehow keep. They told me the cold would get easier with time. That after a few weeks working the overnight shift in the industrial freezer, I'd barely feel it. They were wrong. You don't get used to cold like that. It gets used to you. Works into your joints, your thoughts. You stop noticing how much time has passed. And then one day, you realize you're standing completely still, just listening to the hum of the fans, wondering how long you've been doing nothing at all. This happened 3 winters ago, but I still haven't talked about it. Not really. Not out loud. I worked at a food distribution warehouse, just outside Joliet. Graveyard shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., stacking pallets of frozen goods into trailers for grocery stores. Nothing glamorous. Just meat, vegetables, ice cream in plastic tubs. The pay was decent, and I didn't mind being alone. The freezer was huge, like a warehouse within the warehouse, kept at minus 22 degrees. The walls were thick, the doors were motorized, and once you were inside, you couldn't hear anything but the industrial drone and your own breathing. We had special suits, thermal coveralls, face masks, gloves with rubber grips. Even so, the chill was like a pressure. You could feel it inside your ears. There was a system. Load the pallets, shrink wrap them, move them toward the dock. The only rule was don't stay in longer than 40 minutes without a break. That's where the freezer room came in. It wasn't actually a room, more of a steel container attached to the main freezer. Inside was a single rolling desk chair, a tiny space heater bolted to the wall, and a chipped metal thermos that someone had left years ago and no one bothered to move. It always smelled faintly like old oranges. Most guys hated the room. It was too cramped, too quiet. You couldn't see anything outside once the door shut, but I didn't mind it. I could thaw my gloves, sip coffee, and breathe a little. That's where I first noticed it. Something small, a faint sound outside the wall, a tapping. I figured it was ice settling or someone wheeling a car past, but it kept happening. Tap, tap, tap. Too even, too deliberate. One night, maybe 3 weeks into the job, I stayed too long. My gloves had soaked through, and the heater felt like the only warm thing on earth. I let myself doze off. Just a few minutes. When I woke, it was dead silent. The heater had clicked off. My breath fogged in front of me, and that's when I heard it again. Tap, 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 tap. It was behind the wall this time. Not the steel side, but the shared wall with the main freezer. Something was on the other side, close. I held my breath. The tapping stopped. Then it scratched. Just once. A long, deliberate scrape like someone dragging their nails down sheet metal. I flung the door open. Nothing but the dim glow of freezer lights and stacked pallets. No carts. No footsteps. Just the usual frost cloud haze hanging in the air. I told myself it was just fatigue. Sleep deprivation, hallucination. Common in cold work. But I couldn't shake the sound. I started hearing it elsewhere. Faint clicks in the storage racks. Brief scratching from the empty trailer bays. Always right on the edge of hearing. Then one night, during a routine walk to scan inventory, I noticed footprints in the frost. Not boot treads like ours. Bare feet. 5 toes. Full heel. Pressed into the icy floor between rows B and C. They were fresh, still crisp. They stopped near a sealed pallet of frozen turkeys and didn't continue. Like whoever made them had just disappeared. I radioed the lead tech. He came, looked, shrugged, and said, "Someone messing around." But I could see it in his face. He'd never seen prints like that either. 2 nights later, the warehouse lost power for about 3 minutes. Backup kicked in, but the freezer lights stayed off longer than the rest. When they finally flickered back, I found the freezer room door wide open. No one admitted to going in. I checked the heater. Still warm. On the wall above the chair, written in what looked like frost traced with a finger, were 4 words. "You stayed too long." I didn't sleep that morning. I sat in my apartment with the heat turned up to 80 and every light on. I Googled the warehouse. Found nothing. No accidents. No deaths. Nothing about that freezer. But I kept thinking about those prints. The way they vanished. My last shift was a week after that. I'd already told my supervisor I was quitting, but I stayed to finish out the schedule. Around 3:40 a.m., the motion lights inside the freezer kicked on by themselves. I was in the break room, sipping coffee, watching the monitors. On screen, the camera covering Eiley flickered, then showed movement, just a flicker of white near the back wall. I zoomed. There was a figure standing by the rack supports. Barefoot, arms close to its sides, head tilted slightly like it was listening. I ran down the hall and slammed the freezer door open. Nothing. Not even footprints this time. When I left that morning, I drove past the shipping docks one last time. A semi was backing in. The driver climbed out, walked toward the building, and then paused. He looked at the corner of the warehouse near the freezer exhaust vent and just stood there. I rolled down my window and called out, asked if he was okay. He turned and said, "There's a woman back there. She's not saying anything." We both walked around the trailer. No one was there. Only the heat of the exhaust vent curling into the cold morning air. He swore he'd seen her. Described the same thing I saw on camera. Barefoot, white clothes, tilted head. That was the last time I went near that place. I've worked at 3 warehouses since. No freezers. No night shifts. I've tried to forget it, but sometimes On really cold mornings, I'll walk past a sheet of ice on a car window or a frozen pane of glass and catch something written in the frost just for a second before it fades. A finger mark or a warning. There's a kind of silence that doesn't comfort you. It waits. The kind that hangs in a room long after the machines have gone quiet. The kind that makes your ears feel full, like they're bracing for a sound that hasn't arrived yet. People say factories are loud, but they don't talk about how loud silence is after 12 hours of humming steel and conveyor belts. I used to think nothing could scare me after dark. I worked alone in a warehouse for years, and it was just me and the echo of my footsteps. But it's not the sound you hear that gets you. It's the ones you shouldn't. 3 years ago, I worked third shift at a packaging facility just outside town. My title was line operator, but really, I was just the guy who made sure the sorting belts didn't jam and nothing caught fire. We ran 24/7, but night shifts were skeleton crew. 2 people inside the building and a guard at the gate. Sometimes just me, if someone called off and the supervisor didn't want to cover. That night, I remember it being cold. Not weather cold, but inside cold. The kind of chill that sets into concrete walls and radiates up through your boots. I clocked in at 10:02 p.m. The floor was already dark except for the safety lights, and there was no sign of Ray, the other operator. I figured he called off, not the first time. The guard, Julio, buzzed me in, same as always. Told me over the intercom to holler if anything goes sideways. I gave him a thumbs up. Routine. I wasn't superstitious. I didn't believe in ghosts or spirits or anything like that. I believed in OSHA violations, burnout, and missing bolts. But looking back, I should have listened to my gut the moment I stepped onto the floor. Because something was different that night, and I wasn't alone. The story, a shift that didn't end right. It started with the radio. I always kept it clipped to my vest, so Julio and I could check in once an hour. Right after 11, I reached for it to ask about a weird flicker on the breaker panel, but it let out this loud static burst before I even touched the button. Not just static, garbled static, like someone talking, but underwater. I called for Julio, but all I got was that warped sound again, then silence. I walked the perimeter to shake it off. Maybe interference, maybe a dying battery. But as I passed loading bay 3, I saw the door was half open. That was wrong. We never left the bays unlocked, especially not overnight. I started toward it, and then the motion sensor light came on in the back corner of the room. Nothing was there. Not a rat, not a box out of place, just a pallet jack and some shrink wrap that looked ripped. I closed the bay door, locked it, moved on. Around midnight, the line jammed. A box had gotten caught sideways in one of the rollers, and when I pulled it out, the entire belt surged forward on its own. It nearly caught my hand. No button had been pressed. I double-checked the system, green across the board, but the belt had moved. On its own, I stood there for a long second, listening. That's when I heard the steps. Light ones. Slow. Coming from the mezzanine above, the catwalk that overlooks the floor. I looked up. Nobody. But the footsteps didn't stop. They circled once. Then again. The metal groaned under the weight. My radio crackled, just a quick gasp of noise, and then nothing. I climbed the stairs with a wrench in hand. My boots were loud on the metal grating, but the other steps had gone silent. I checked every corner of that walkway. Nothing. No one. Just the dull red glow of the emergency lights and my own breath in the cold. But when I turned to go back down, I saw it. On the floor below, by the breaker box. A figure, barely more than a silhouette. Still, watching. I froze. Not because I was scared, at least, not yet, but because I couldn't make sense of it. I called out. Loud. The figure didn't flinch. I took a step, and the lights flickered. When they came back, the floor was empty again. I went down slow, checked every door, every closet. Nothing. I even called Julio again. No answer. I made it to the security office around 1:30 a.m. It's at the far end of the building, behind a locked glass door. I could see his desk from the hall. Empty. The monitors were still running, showing all angles of the floor. Nothing unusual. I waited, watched the screen for a minute, then two. That's when camera 4 glitched. The feed went black, then came back, just for a second, but in that second, the camera showed something standing in the conveyor lane, right where I'd pulled the box earlier. It was bent forward, unmoving, long arms. Then it was gone. I ran back to the floor. The lights flickered again, and the cold had gotten worse. I could see my breath now. I didn't see the figure again, but the steps returned. They didn't echo this time. They scraped. They circled me from just out of sight. I did the only thing I could. I hit the shutdown. Everything went dark. Fully dark. The hum of the motors. The backup fans. Gone. And in that absolute stillness, I heard the one sound I will never forget. A knock. From inside the maintenance closet behind me. 3 short knocks. Close. I didn't open it. I couldn't. I backed away, never turning around fully, and ran to the exit. I buzzed the gate myself. Julio wasn't there. His car was gone. I drove home, shaking. The next day I called out sick. So did Julio. When I finally came in 2 nights later, the supervisor told me something odd. The security footage from that shift was missing. Not corrupted, just gone. Deleted. No one had access but Julio. No one's seen him since. Ending. What's still inside? The facility is still there. Still running. I quit a month later. Took a job that paid less, but let me sleep at night. Every so often, I drive past that warehouse and see the lights flicker behind the bay doors. I tell myself it was stress, sleep deprivation, something rational. But when I remember the footsteps circling above me, how they didn't sound like boots or shoes, just movement, I wonder what else uses night shifts to stretch its legs, and whether it's still in there, waiting for the next operator who thinks he's working alone.